Amid the beauty and seemingly endless diversity of life, it's easy to forget how much we depend on the organisms around us, especially the plants. What we see as simple roots, stems, and leaves represent one of nature's architectural wonders. In a variety of forms, these intricate structures carry out the complex processes that support all life on Earth.
Plants are really needed. Not only are they needed for our food, but they're needed for our climate. Their roots hold onto the soil. Their evapotranspiration cools the air. They exude oxygen that we all breathe. So we need plants more than they need us. If we all died tomorrow, it wouldn't make any difference to the plants. If they died, we're goners. Our relationship with plants has been going for 10,000 years. People started as hunters and gatherers, and they say that women were responsible for the development of agriculture, that women would save the best seeds and they would plant them into the ground, and as a consequence, families became more centralized and communities developed because you had to now grow plants in the ground.
Through centuries of trial and error, our ancestors learned much about plants and what they need to grow. But with the amazing diversity of these organisms, we only recently have come to appreciate the remarkable similarity in their structure.
You can think of a plant as being three organs only: the root, the stem, and the leaf. With that in mind, then everything is a variation on that. So if we look at flowers, we can really think of flowers as being modified leaves. If we look at stems, we can see that stems vary from the very fat photosynthetic cacti to the typical sort of little vining stems that you would see in other types of plants.
Each part of the plant must play its role in the survival of the organism as a whole. Dr. Ann Hirsch studies the roots of plants, which have the crucial job of collecting nutrients.
The roots are the part that everybody has a tendency to forget because they're under the ground. And the roots anchor the plant, and most importantly, they absorb nutrients and water.
Like all organs, roots function through the work of tissues, groups of similar cells working together toward a common purpose. On the surface of the root, layers of tightly packed epidermal tissue offer a protective barrier, yet still permit the absorption of nutrients. Extensions of these cells, called root hairs, increase their surface area to help absorption. The bulk of the plant is composed of ground tissue, such as the root cortex. Some of these cells store food, while others help regulate the flow of nutrients to the center of the root. Here, we find the long, slender cells of vascular tissue. These natural transit ways move nutrients from one part of the plant to another.
It's the soil water that contains the nutrients. The root hairs that are present on the young growing roots then absorb this soil water by a process known as osmosis. Osmosis is diffusion across a membrane. So you have water flowing from the root hair through the cortical cells, which are the next cells in from the root, until you come to a cell layer called the endodermis. This cell layer has a waxy coat around its cell walls, and as a consequence, the water and the nutrient mixture can no longer travel around the cell wall. It is directed through the cell itself, and so you have now a point of regulation.
But plants can absorb these nutrients only if the soil contains them. Even our ancestors recognized this in the value of rich, fertile ground.
All of civilization was founded on something like 9 inches of topsoil. And it takes 1,000 years to make 1 inch of topsoil. And we lose topsoil at a tremendous rate. I mean, soil and water are our 2 most precious resources. And there's things that people completely take for granted.
The essential nutrients for plant growth and development fall into 2 classes: micronutrients and macronutrients. Micronutrients like iron and zinc are those required in trace amounts, while macronutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus are needed in much larger quantities. And plants aren't the only organisms that require these nutrients.
Humans require a lot of these things. If we don't have iron, for example, we suffer from anemia. We need phosphorus for our bones. We need nitrogen for our proteins.
We get many of our nutrients from plants, which in turn collect them from the soil. Perhaps the most difficult macronutrient for plants to obtain is nitrogen. Nitrogen gas makes up over 3/4 of our atmosphere, but most organisms can't use it. Only a few types of bacteria are capable of what scientists call nitrogen fixation, converting nitrogen gas into forms that plants can use. We find clues to this mysterious process in ancient farming practices, most notably the use of legumes, such as beans, peas, or clover.
The legumes are the only group of plants, with one exception, that form a nitrogen-fixing symbiosis with the bacterium Rhizobium. What happens is the legumes are able to build a little house for the bacteria on their roots. That little house is called a nodule, and the bacteria live inside that nodule, and they fix atmospheric nitrogen to ammonia, which is converted to glutamine, which is an essential amino acid for the plant. The nitrogen-fixing legumes are natural fertilizers. So if you look at many cultures, you'll see corn plants planted with peas or beans. As the plants die, the nitrogen that's within the nodules is returned to the soil. Or we see another process called green manuring, where a farmer will grow a field of clover one year and then plow the whole field under to return the nitrogen back to the soil, because the grain crops, such as wheat or corn, really take a lot of the nitrogen out of the soil.
Having observed farming practices around the world, Dr. Hirsch hopes to solve a puzzling mystery with some far-reaching implications.
What we are trying to understand is really how the rhizobium interact with the root hair and why other plants don't. If other plants could fix nitrogen, then you really would not have to rely on chemical fertilizers. You would not have to rely on petroleum products, which are involved in making the chemical fertilizers, and concomitantly the problems with runoffs from chemical fertilizers and pollution of lakes and stream beds.
Although not all plants can fix nitrogen, they all depend on their roots to gather nutrients, and ultimately so do we. But the remarkable success of plants also relies on another part of their amazing architecture. From their roots, plants rise into stems. In different shapes and sizes, stems provide structural support while serving as major throughways for water and other nutrients. But plants aren't the only organisms to benefit from these marvels of engineering.
Of course, to the plant, the stem is a vital portion of its structure. It holds up the plant, it exposes the leaves to high levels of light and so forth. We as humans are also very dependent on stems, the products from stems, the lumber, firewood, paper that we produce. We get sugar cane from the stem of a grass, and we get maple syrup from the wood of a tree.
But before we can take advantage of these many benefits, stems first have to grow. In plants, this growth occurs only at specific regions called meristems.
We can think of a meristem as always being a few hours old. For example, if you look at a redwood tree, if you would look actually at the shoot apical meristem, you would see that these were cells that were just dividing, had just come into being.
The apical meristem functions by piling up cells behind it, and therefore it pushes this group of cells further and further away from where they were.
So this is what makes a plant unique. It grows by something called indeterminate growth. That means it continues to grow at its extremities for perpetuity. So a redwood tree theoretically could grow forever. A human or an animal exhibits determinate growth. We grow to a certain size and we never get any taller.
While plants grow in length from apical meristems, increases in width occur only at regions called lateral meristems. Biologists know this distinction as primary and secondary growth.
Primary growth is primarily responsible for setting up the original tissues of the plant, and secondary growth is responsible for making those tissues thicker.
Secondary growth also offers humans one of the most important benefits we receive from plant stems: wood.
Wood is what we call a complex tissue, and it has several different types of cells. Within the wood, you will find cells that are hollow tubes for moving water from the roots to the leaves, and you will also find thicker walled cells for holding the plant up, which are often called wood fibers. To the layperson, woody means anything that has a thick, hard tissue. To a botanist, wood in the strictest sense refers to something that is produced by the vascular cambium, which is a lateral meristem.
The vascular cambium is a layer of embryonic cells in stems and roots, which in wood produces the annual growth we see as rings. Years ago, scientists found they could use these rings to determine the age of plants and to trace climatic history.
During a wet year, they noticed that there was quite a thick increment of growth, and during a dry year, there was a corresponding thin increment of growth. Each ring consists of a dark and a light zone in the wood. We call these early wood and late wood, and the early wood cells often have slightly thinner walls and are wider, and therefore to our eyes they look less dense or lighter in color than the late wood cells, which are thicker walled cells. By studying the changes in thickness of one year to the next and comparing it to local climatic conditions, scientists have been able to reconstruct the climatic history of many locations around the world.
In addition to strengthening the stem, wood helps perform one of the living world's great feats of engineering: the transport of water from root to leaf, sometimes hundreds of feet high. This occurs through a network of internal pipelines called xylem.
In the typical plant, xylem is synonymous with wood. Also, it has conduits within it for moving water from the roots to the leaves, flowers, and fruits.
Plants transport water and nutrients from their roots to their leaves through a vascular tissue called xylem. These are dead, empty cells which connect end to end, forming long, continuous tubes. Because water molecules carry a slight electric charge, they're attracted to each other. This natural attraction, known as cohesion, links the molecules in long, continuous chains. At the leaves, water escapes the xylem and evaporates through microscopic pores on the surface called stomata. As each molecule breaks loose, it pulls up another molecule to take its place. This continuous pulling tension extends all the way down the xylem tube to the roots. Here, the rising chain of molecules keeps pressure low, allowing water and nutrients to enter through osmosis.
The water forms a more or less solid column throughout the plant. It evaporates at the top from the leaves, and the whole column, because it's held together by cohesive forces, is pulled up through the conduits.
While xylem brings water up to the plant's leaves for photosynthesis, another tissue called phloem distributes the resulting sugars out to the rest of the plant.
Xylem tissue of a plant has the water conduits in it, whereas the phloem tissue has a sugar conducting units or conduits, which are called sieve tubes, which have minute pores between the individual cells.
Plants transport sugar and other organic molecules through a vascular tissue called phloem. Phloem also forms continuous tubes, but unlike xylem, these cells are alive and constantly at work. The sugars produced during photosynthesis diffuse into the phloem, where companion cells actively pump the molecules into special cells called sieve tube members. The growing concentration of sugar molecules attracts water from neighboring tissue through osmosis. This inflow of water creates a high pressure that pushes the sugary solution through the sieve tubes away from the source. Elsewhere in the plant, organic molecules are removed from the phloem for storage or use in metabolism. This creates a drop in pressure, what biologists call a sink. As the plant removes molecules, new replacements arrive, moving from the high-pressure source to the low-pressure sink.
For phloem, the source is the place where the sugars are loaded into the sieve tubes, and the sink is the place where the carbohydrates are removed. So flow in the phloem goes from high pressure at the source to low pressure at the sink.
Threaded with bundles of both xylem and phloem, stems serve as the plant's major expressway, moving water and nutrients to and from its living cells.
So this continuum of water and nutrients going from the roots up the stems and out the leaves of the stomata is what drives the assimilation of nutrients. And at the same time, the carbohydrates that are made in the leaves are then assimilated down to the roots. So we have a bidirectional flow of materials made by the leaves, absorbed by the roots. And so what we have is a continuum between root, stem, and leaf.
Stems serve many important functions for both plants and humans. But perhaps the most critical role of all is to support the metabolic factories we all depend on to survive. From stems grow leaves, arguably the most ingenious of all plant structures. Leaves perform the most critical task of a plant, and perhaps the most crucial to life on this planet: photosynthesis.
In essence, photosynthesis is the heart of all living processes on Earth. It's the ability to trap the virtually inexhaustible energy from the sun and make carbohydrate from carbon dioxide that's really critical. It provides the energy and the carbon building blocks for more plants, but it also provides the building blocks for all animals. Without carbohydrate, we would all starve. Furthermore, without the oxygen produced by the photosynthetic processes, we would have a very difficult time.
But even as humans depend on photosynthesis to survive, we are also producing products that may threaten this crucial lifeline.
The fundamental focus of my research revolves around how the air pollutants that man has made harms the green plant's ability to grow and develop. In many urban environments, we have the production of ozone. This ozone seems to inhibit the ability of the plant to produce the necessary carbohydrates for good, vigorous growth.
The key to this problem lies in the structure of a leaf, a metabolic factory perfectly suited to its role in life.
Most of us, when we look at a plant, say, oh, that's a leaf because it's flat and broad. In many cases, that's the case because it provides for efficient gas exchange with the atmosphere so that all important CO2 can enter in large abundance into the plant. And it's also broad so it can trap a lot of energy from the sun, having a very large area.
Leaves are also designed to collect and conserve the vital nutrients they need to produce carbohydrates.
What happens in photosynthesis is that the CO2, light energy, and water combine to form the sugar that we need, the carbohydrate. Water may be in large abundance for us, but in fact the plant has to gain all of its water from the root system. And if the soil is dry or drying out, the plant wants to conserve water in this dry environment. So as a result, the leaves are generally covered with a hard epidermis, a cuticle, waxes. That prevents both water loss and gas entry.
But plants must exchange gases with their environment to conduct photosynthesis. To allow carbon dioxide to enter and oxygen to exit, leaves have small pores on their surface known as stomata. But while these microscopic gateways solve one challenge, they create another.
The plant has a major problem. If it opens up so that the CO2 can go in, water comes out. So it's a very delicate balancing act the plant does.
Leaves survive this balancing act using guard cells located in pairs at each stoma.
The guard cells, when water flows into them, swell and open. As the water flows out of the guard cells, these guard cells become much more flaccid, and as a result they close, largely governed by the way the wall is, so that they shut the stomate down completely.
But when the guard cells open, the leaves are vulnerable to invaders, dangerous airborne pollutants such as ozone. Dr. Heath hopes to discover exactly how these chemicals harm the plants.
Okay, are we ready to go?
As his study began, Dr. Heath theorized that air pollution disrupts the function of plant stomata. To find out, his team uses an infrared camera to determine the temperature of leaves, which in turn reveals the condition of their guard cells.
What we see is effectively the energy coming from the thermal energy of the leaf. We then take that image and change it to a false color so that we see high temperature as red and low temperature as blue. It turns out that energy loss is great when there's immense water evaporation and the stomates are open.
In the eyes of Dr. Heath's camera, blue means a cool leaf with wide open stomata. Red signifies a hot leaf with the stomata closed.
What we see with ozone is as the pollutant builds up, or as the leaf sits in a pollutant atmosphere for longer periods, this leaf slowly closes its stomates. This means less CO2 is going into the plant. There is less productivity during the day, and therefore, over the course of many days, we have less plant growth. What does it do for us? It means that we have less food on the table for us because our crops aren't as efficient and aren't as productive.
Plants have served humankind for thousands of years. They feed us, they clothe us, they shelter us from the elements. All this is possible because of their amazing architecture and extraordinary abilities. Transforming light into life, plants form the foundation of life on Earth. From roots to stems to leaves, these seemingly docile organisms conceal a whirlwind of activity that benefits all living things.
I think most people don't realize how exciting plants are. We have a tendency to think of them as very passive, complacent creatures. But really, they're underneath that quiet exterior is a raging series of plant hormones, of plant molecules, of growth and development. If we could hear them speak, we could hear things about a completely different world than what we see.